Another arrow zipped over our heads and landed in a nearby tree in time with the sound of a thunderclap. The horse regained its footing, but at that point, it was a moot struggle. The creature suddenly cried out as, to my horror, the first arrow finally met its mark, piercing the poor beast in its eye. Had some of my pursuers managed to get ahead of us? In half a second, another arrow appeared in one of the creature's knobby knees, and it collapsed, sending me sprawling head over heels into the mud and knocking all the breath from my lungs. My whole body ached and burned, but I had to keep moving. Climbing up onto my trembling legs, desperately gulping air back into my lungs, I pushed my way through the trees where the pursuers couldn't bring their horses in after me. If they wanted me in the scroll, they'd have to do it on foot, too. I bumped into far too many trees, unable to see them coming through the blanketing night. It was no use. At 50 years old and far past my prime, there was nothing I could do to ensure my escape. They would get me, and I would die. There was no more time. It was now or never. Dropping to my knees in the mud, I slid the magical scroll of time from my leather bag and unfurled it before me. Raindrops continued to fall, smearing the enchanted ink across the paper, but the words were already in my mind and soon on my lips as I began to cast a spell. Just as the shadowy shapes of my pursuers began to break through the trees, I was engulfed in a flash of sky-blue light, and the next moment I was gone. I just hoped this life would be better than the last. Chapter 1. The first sense to return to me was touch. As time and space were swept around me in a torrential whirlwind, the first hint that I had reached my destination was the sensation of my youth returning to my skin and of the ground beneath my feet. That ground was springy and fertile with growing grasses, the playground of my childhood. The second sense to resurface was my hearing, with the sounds of screams arising all around me, and the sounds of the crackling of flames were soon joined by the thick smell of smoke. I blinked, and all at once the world blossomed before me, a time from so long ago but never, ever forgotten. It was that day, the day that Jukyo, my home village, was burned to the ground. The scroll had placed me just on the outskirts of the village, facing the rising flames that engulfed nearly every house where my people used to live. Neighbors and family friends ran past me, screaming for me to join them and run. My gut sank in disappointment. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The scroll was supposed to take me back to a time before the fire, back to the time of my biggest mistake to give me a chance to save them all. So why the fuck had it taken me here, after the worst of the horror was over? Ignoring the calls of my fleeing people, I grimly pushed toward the town. I had to see if anyone was still alive. I darted past crumbling houses and innumerable charred bodies to my childhood home. And to my chagrin, there it was, collapsed in smoldering ashes. The once curved rectangular roof had caved in, bringing down a large patch of the wooden walls with it. The scroll hadn't worked after all. Not how it was supposed to, anyway. There, buried beneath collapsed boards and covered in ashes, were the bodies of my family. My mother's long black hair was singed, her eyes wide like a fish's, half her face warped by terrible burns. My father and my little sister were hardly any better off. Their bodies were twisted beneath the rubble. And there I was, all over again, the only member of my family left standing, untouched and powerless to do anything to save the rest. Anger pounded through my veins, filling my body from the inside. It was like a flame was burning inside of me, begging to be released. Discarded in the grass and half buried beneath scattered and burned wood, I spotted something shining. Inching closer, I saw that it was my father's old sword, the one he had used back in his days as a soldier, back when there was still something hopeful to fight for, and before the world had gone to shit under the rule of the shogun lords. It was his prized possession, hanging on the wall of our home for years in a place of honor. And as I gazed upon it on the ground, a new thought struck me. I thought of the man who had done this, the one I had seen all those years ago. It was possible he was still here somewhere, still wreaking havoc on the village of Jokyo. Maybe in the sad and desolate future I had just come from, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. But I was back in my old body, back to a life.